So let's get back to nature and talk about the work that you all do. I guess I'll let you pick what project area you might like to share more about with us, at least to start.
I don't quite know where to start. We're working on so much. Maybe could I give like a quick rundown of just projects that we have ongoing?
Sure.
I'll be brief. So we've got a fish ladder installation, also known as a fishway, going on the Farm River in North Brantford. That's for migratory alewife and other species to get over a dam. We often take out dams, but when there's not that opportunity, we might pursue another option, such as a fish ladder or technical fishway or a natural rock ramp. So we're working on that. We've got a few dam removals in the pipe that we're working on. There's one out in Fenger Brook out in New London. That's a really small dam. That's like 4 feet high. Really tiny little pond. We're working on taking that out. We're also looking at the Dana Dam in Merwin Meadows Park on the Norwalk River. That's a much larger dam. Still a pretty small impoundment. Again, for migratory fish, and the restoration of sort of cold water habitat through that impoundment, which will soon be a free-flowing channel with floodplains and floodplain wetlands sort of abutting it. We've got some fairly large-scale green infrastructure projects. We've got one that's going in the Hamden Town Center Park. That's going to be what's now just a soggy field is going to be restored to an actual wetland to sort of filter stormwater that's running off of a site, as well as creates a little pocket of habitat in a park. We've got some really small stuff. Residential, Gwen and I were actually both digging up sod earlier today on a residential rain garden. So that's just essentially going to a number of houses in a priority watershed in the city of New Haven, and disconnecting downspouts that go into the sewer system and directing that instead to a small depression known as a rain garden to infiltrate that water and again create a little tiny piece of habitat with wetter soils, vegetation that grows in that area. We plant native plants for pollinators and other species. We're in the middle of monitoring season, so we're checking traps every day. And yeah, that's a sample of what we're working on currently. I don't know if you want to delve into any of that, or if you want to talk a bit more about future projects that we're also looking at.
Well, it's interesting hearing about the stormwater. So you're actually creating a mini habitat, but you're also, the effort is to prevent, even if it was a small number of houses, from that water going out into the sound. That's the ultimate goal. Is that, am I on target there?
Yes. There's a number of issues with stormwater. I think the issue in that particular neighborhood is a combined sewer overflow. Gwen, is that right in the West River? Okay. So some older infrastructure, some older sewer infrastructure combines the water from the storm drain, so the water from the street, and the water from your house into the same sewer system and treats it all, which is fine if there's not too much water. When there's too much water, that overflows and all of it dumps out untreated into waterways. So that's one problem. That's what's known as a CSO. So in that neighborhood, what they're trying to do is, or what we're trying to do is remove any water that doesn't need to be going into that system, send that into the ground instead and have it infiltrate the soil, which is how it naturally would be. That would be the natural hydrology anyway. And there's a lot of benefits to that just in and of its own value. When water runs off of a surface, off of pavement, it picks up dirt and debris and pollutants, and it gets warm and it washes very quickly into streams. So it's polluted water. You can imagine a lot of water rushing in all at once. it's very flashy. So the water is like really high and then it's really low, depending on what's happening, with through precipitation. But if it's infiltrating the groundwater and seeping through more slowly, it's getting filtered and it's creating a more steady hydrograph. So yeah, there's ups and downs, there's highs and lows, there's floods and droughts, but it's not as, the swings aren't as wide. So that's kind of the idea, one of the ideas behind a more restoring these natural systems through green infrastructure. Did that answer your question?
Yes. No, that was
Maybe
good.
more so. I'm sorry, I kind of went on a little
Oh, that
rant.
was good.
Okay.
And I've heard you use the term urban restoration. Would that fall into that category, or is urban restoration something different? Like when I hear that, I'm thinking of, some of the cities where there's rushing water, just in the scenario you talked about, but instead of a local community of houses, it may be sidewalks and streets, and it's ultimately trying to get down to the river and into the sound. So that's a larger scale project. Can
Yeah, so this project, I'll use New Haven as an example community, but this could exist in a variety of communities. There is, an urban downtown area that's very heavily paved, and then really a lot of paved surfaces quite far into the residential area, and then eventually once you get up rivers upstream, there is actually a lot of water company land and more forested and less dense development. So as you're going from north to south, you're running downhill, and water is collecting pollutants and picking up speed, frankly, and then discharging into the rivers and waterways that feed Long Island Sound. Alex described the combined sewer overflow problems that exist, and so that's untreated sewage also discharging right into our rivers and then into Long Island Sound. But urban restoration doesn't have to mean one project in one downtown city streetscape. And in fact, one of the problems with urban water management is that separating those combined sewers, would require digging up some of those really intensely, heavily trafficked and used city streets, and digging up pipes that are maybe made of brick that have been under there for 100 years or more. And so an alternative to that is filtering and managing and filtering water where it falls, rain where it falls. And so New Haven is really adopted that in a major way. So there are 200 bioswales, which are these curbside rain gardens that are a little bit deeper than a rain garden, right? So they have this well, and in New Haven, they're sort of 5 feet by 15 feet in the tree belt. And they capture and filter rain from the street, and are planted with plants that are okay with having their feet wet, but are okay with being dry, and are used to some sort of semi-harsh conditions. So maybe a little bit of the salty, maybe they're a little salt tolerant from road salt, and okay with some of the pollutants, and maybe even break down some of those pollutants. And the benefit that has, has huge water quality benefits, right? Because the water going through is not picking up pollutants, and it's all filtering into the ground instead of going in a pipe into the river. But it also has these water quantity benefits where you're not having, it's actually helping to alleviate the amount of water that we're getting downtown in our most urban centers. In New Haven, it's actually at the train station. So one of the major reasons for this citywide effort was that the train station experiences flooding, and it was experiencing more and more frequent flooding as time goes on, and we're seeing more significant rain events. And so instead of demolishing the train station or doing something at the location of the train station, the decision was made to do these distributed projects throughout the city, and they together in summation help alleviate that problem. but the bioswales themselves and the rain gardens that Alex and I were digging today, they are still in the urban city. They're within the city limits, and in areas where often there are not a lot of green spaces. And certainly if you're a migratory bird or a butterfly, there aren't very many opportunities to stop off and eat and pollinate. And so they create these little pockets of native plants that exist in a sort of a patchwork throughout the city. And Save the Sound's role in this part of the watershed has been to take that model and move it into the private land. So the city is working in the public right of way, and doing a huge number at this point. And we were involved with those at the beginning, but now they've got that part right. So they've tested that model and they're willing to implement them at scale. But what they are not as prepared to do as we are is to cultivate partnerships with private homeowners who would be willing and interested in green infrastructure and stormwater management, but that's not within the city right of way. So that's our role in this sort of citywide effort to manage stormwater in this greener way.
Okay.
Yeah, I think just to follow up on that, I think it's not intuitive for most folks, and it's hard to believe that like what you could do with the water coming out of your downspout on Royden Ave in New Haven has anything to do with the cleanliness and the habitat quality of the sound. But it really does. And I think like, if everybody did a little tiny bit throughout that area, so again, as Gwen was saying, that distributed impact would make a big difference, because the problems that we're facing with stormwater and other environmental issues is it didn't all happen at once. It happened little bit by bit. More houses were built and more, the processes were disrupted bit by bit. And now we're sort of working on bringing them back bit by bit also.
Thanks for watching. For more information, visit our website at www.futurefrogmen.org.